走り出せ走り出せ空高くハトと差し
Hi guys, it's Wasabifold here again with another One Piece video for you. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a flaw that I think that exists in Diable Jamble and explaining a technique that is perfect for correcting this flaw if it's used correctly. Before I begin, I just want to say that this was part of a larger theory that I had put up on Ora Jackson that tried to examine Sanji's entire fighting style and add techniques to it that would completely fix this fighting style in an attempt to get as close as possible to his end of series power moveset. But most of this theory ended up being stolen on YouTube, and in some ways I'm kind of glad about that, because the person that did it left out the technique part that I'm going to be discussing here today. I guess he thought that if he left that out it wouldn't be obvious that he stole it, but also he motivated me in the first place to come to YouTube and share my theories before they got stolen by other people. So with that out of the way, I just want to say thank you guys for all the support. I'm not here to name names or start YouTube drama. If you've seen the theory, you would be able to compare it. The link for the original theory is going to be in the description, and let's just get right into it. So the flaw in Diable Jamble is also its greatest strength, and its greatest strength is how it's grounded in real world physics, and that also means it has to obey the real world physics. And the problem with Diable Jamble is the law of thermodynamics is working against it. The hotter Diable Jamble gets, it creates intense heat in a very localized location, but it also means that that heat is hotter than anything else that is around it. As such, this technique is always losing heat. The moment Sanji stops spinning, it's losing heat to the environment at a rapid rate, and that rate only increases the hotter this technique gets. In other words, this technique has an inverse proportional ratio between how much work you put in to activate the heat and how much heat you actually gain. The hotter Sanji takes this technique, the more work he has to do to make it hotter, but also the less he can actually get out of it because it loses heat even faster. And that is the problem with Diable Jamble. It's like an ever increasingly steep hill as far as this technique is concerned, until you reach a point where it might not even be worth it to take it to certain levels of temperature. And that, I think, is something that could be fixed. But even more to the point, this technique is too short as far as an ace up your sleeve is concerned. When you look at the Admirals and the fact that they can fight for 10 days, there's no way that Sanji can handle Diable Jamble active for 10 days. Hell, how would he even be able to handle it for an hour? You know, we've never seen Sanji fight for that long, and if he's going to need this technique in the end to beat people, he's going to have to find a way to make this technique last a lot longer, be more efficient with its heat, and find a way to supplement the creation of that heat and the generation of that heat without having to constantly spin every couple of minutes once it runs out. So that's the main problem with the technique. That's the flaw. And I believe that Oda has introduced the ability that is perfect for correcting this flaw. And that technique was introduced in Dressrosa and is currently part of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, and that is House Shokin. Now House Shokin, probably butchered that pronunciation, let's be honest, but House Shokin is a technique where the person vibrates their molecules to generate these vibrational forces that can rip armor apart and cause it to shatter. And I think that's one of the coolest techniques to come out of Dressrosa. But beyond that, this technique actually has applications for Sanji if he can get his hands on it. You see, instead of just creating vibrational forces, when you vibrate molecules, that's basically just creating friction. And if you can generate enough friction leads to heat, and like I said, this matches perfectly with Diable Jamble's principle. At its core, it's a technique that relies on friction. But if Sanji redirects creating friction against the ground to creating friction between his molecules, not only does he have the ability to control this heat better, but he can also generate these vibrations constantly and keep that heat up and basically make it more efficient and less wasted. And that is what I think will actually happen. I believe that House Shokin is a technique that Sanji is destined to get and improve to the point where it not only generates vibrations but can also generate heat. And this would allow Sanji to use Diable Jamble for long periods of time, so long as he could keep those vibrations up. He might not even have to keep them up all the time. He could just vibrate when necessary to reignite the technique without it going out. It makes it more versatile and useful in combat situations where he doesn't have time to spin because the enemy is coming up on him, he's going to need a technique like this where it can extend the length of Diable Jamble. Otherwise, he wouldn't be as potent in combat against these high-level opponents. And that's why I say Haoshoken is perfect, but even more to the point, it fits perfectly with Sanji's theme of fighters. Sanji usually gets two different types of fighters. Unlike Zoro, who always gets some kind of swordsman, Sanji usually gets either a martial artist or a defensive wall as his opponent, such as Pearl and Jiabura with his Tekai Kenpo, or Absalom, who had his gorilla body, and he also gets martial artists like Jin and Bon Clay and Wanza in the Sea Train. And that is the way Oda has created his theme and aesthetic. This technique is perfect for Sanji because the combination of vibrations and heat make it a perfect foil for defensive walls. One, when heat comes into contact with a solid, it adds more energy to the solid, and depending on how strong the molecular bonds between that solid is, the heat that's added gives the atoms so much energy that they begin to move. They become excited and they pull away from the entire whole, and that is what creates what we like to call melting. That's what transfers solids from being a solid to a liquid, is heat. The same thing from liquid to gas. Basically, doing this with heat allows Sanji to break down molecules. That's how he was able to beat Jiabura so easily, is that his molecules weren't really changed. Jiabura just kind of tensed them up to make them hold together better, and Sanji's heat forced them apart, and that was how he was able to completely burn through Tekai like it was butter, like it was nothing. Vibrations add an extra layer of the same effect, because with the vibrational effects, they force molecules apart, and therefore Sanji would be able to almost get through any defense in the world with the combination of Haoshoken and Diable Jamble together. This would be a deadly martial arts, and it would be so perfect for Sanji because he'd be the only one that's using it to generate heat. He wouldn't just be copying his vibrational effects, even though he'd be able to do it. It also doesn't require him to give up his mantra. Just like Sai, he would be using it on his feet only. And I think this works perfectly with Sanji. So what do you guys think? Do you think that this technique is perfect for Sanji, both in his theme wise, both technically wise? Does it fix his flaws? Because I think it does. And I think with this technique, he'd be able to sustain higher levels of heat, such as white hot heat or blue flames. I just think it's perfect for Sanji all around. So that is the theory, really. Haoshoken is Sanji's missing technique. It fixes the flaw in Diable Jamble. So that is Wasabi signing out. Thank you guys for listening, and that was another One Piece theory.